Good morning. Welcome to week 5 of Women Changing the Environment, WGST 201. I hope you're all keeping warm. It's absolutely frigid today. I love Saskatchewan, but I could do without the minus 4,000. It's absolutely killing me. So I've decided that, in part because I was sick and kind of behind on changing the videos, but also that I'd leave them up for a day or two in each unit so that Pat goes through the lecture like in her video sort of in great detail, and so that's maybe helpful to some of you. I tend to do things a little bit differently, so I'll leave it up for a day or two at the beginning of every section, and then I'll go ahead and post my own, right, which sort of focuses on some different things and in a different kind of way asks you to connect some dots and apply what you're learning to the world that you're living in a different kind of way. So this week it's sort of gender and health, and we look at things like oil, and I think we can think about climate change, and I think that we can think about the ways in which women are adversely or disproportionately sort of affected by environmental degradation and natural disaster and these kinds of things. So I would say that one of the key things that has been staring us all in the face over the last year is the Dakota Pipeline. It's right here in our own backyard. It has the potential to absolutely affect every single one of us. And it's sort of what Pat was talking about and what Vandana Shiva talks about a lot, which is this sort of oppositional relationship between capitalism and, sort of sustainability and the precautionary tale and those kinds of things. Or precautionary principle. We have a fairly profound sort of anti-pipeline movement afoot, and it includes not just those who are often seen as, being like a fringe element where the environment is concerned, or any sort of anti-government kind of movement. In fact, here we see a real mobilization of sort of quote-unquote the people, right? Those who are standing up in protection of the land range from veterans to, Indigenous folks are leading the charge, but veterans who often are sort of, make up perhaps a little bit more of the patriotic sort of conservative right, have also recognized, the military has recognized. There's a really wide range of folks who are saying, like, this is a real problem. It has the potential to contaminate water, right? And Pat notes that, we note in the lecture, and I think Pat mentioned it in her video too, that we can't live without water, right? Our oil dependency is seriously problematic. We have to start looking at different things, and there's a real refusal on the part of big money corporations to examine alternatives. And I think there isn't a single government, there's nobody that we can hold responsible singularly for us finding ourselves in the situation that we're in, where the environment is concerned and the damage sort of that extraction of oil has done to the earth. But I think what is clear is that we've now reached a particular point in time where we don't have many choices. We need to start exploring alternatives and really put a screeching halt on this oil dependency. And that's super important to people here in Saskatchewan just in general, because we are resource-rich land, and lots of that is oil. Lots of our families have suffered since oil has gone bust, and now communities are starting to sort of look for people to fill their oil patches again. But it's going to be short-lived. I mean, this is not a sustainable way of life. And so this particular issue around capitalism and sustainability, and oil in particular, is really, really relevant for all of us, I think, the world over. But I think we can feel the effects, and we can see them here, right in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities, in our own backyard. So, as news continues to unfold about the pipeline, I encourage you to really, sort of keep this in mind and think about how this unfolds and what does this look like. We know that climate change, although often it's debated, has given rise to more natural disaster, let's say. And there's a book called Tropic of Chaos by Christian Parenti, and he traces violence across a number of communities and its relationship to climate change. And so what climate change, looking at how when climate change sort of negatively impacts a community or people's ability to provide for themselves, to be self-sustaining, and really compromises their survival, that what we see is violence, right? There tends to be scarcity of resources. There is, raiding of resources, or there can be, and that violence is sort of a natural follow-up to episodes of climate change and the kinds of effects that it has. So really interesting time also to be thinking about that when we have big businesses who are really intimately tied to particular practices and ways of operating that seem to fuel climate change, and at the same time, often out of this camp we have the naysayers that climate change is not a thing, it's not real, doesn't exist. But then we have people whose lived lives are intimately tied to the cycles of nature, who perhaps are far removed from those who are sitting in an office somewhere in some sort of a tower making some sort of decision that's going to affect all of us. And they can see the sort of immediate effect. And in lots of places across the world, those who are on the front line, who experience the immediate impact of climate change and environmental degradation, are women. So women tend to work the less technological jobs. For example, in developing nations, when new technologies come in, often it's the men who leave rural areas and go to cities to have these kinds of jobs. And so women continue to sort of be on the front line, right? They're working in fields, they're working in rice paddies, they're directly exposed to chemicals, but also they can see in the growing, the trends of the crops that they grow, or that fail to grow, as the case might be, various and sundry changes that are related to what's happening in the environment around them. We also know that environmental degradation and climate change have a profound effect on water, and women and girls are typically those who procure water for their families, right? And that's our survival. Everyone is dependent on water for our survival. And so it's a really important task to maintenance of households and families and people. And as water sources become compromised, women and girls are having to walk farther and farther. First off, which changes what their daily life looks like, but further, which puts them at risk, right? The further away they walk, the further away they are from their communities. Often this is a task that's done alone. And so there are risks not only from, predators in their natural environment, right, like animals and things of this nature, but also really at risk and vulnerable to harm from other human beings, sexual assault being one of the biggest impacts that we know water collection has on girls and women. So this, in lots of ways, the effects of what happened to our environment are very much gendered in the ways that they are experienced, and who sort of bears the most material and immediate impact when there are changes that sort of require roles and duties to change as well. Another example, I think, is sex trade work, and the lecture touches on that a little bit in the discussion around HIV. First off, women are sort of just more vulnerable in general to contracting HIV, but in terms of more of heterosexual sort of sex, it's more likely that a male partner will give it to a female partner than a female to a male. They, from what we know, and that's just a matter of anatomy at this point, but we also know that, again, when environmental change, environmental degradation has negative impacts on a particular community's environment, typically what that means is that resources either become scarce, or there may be fighting among communities. People are starving, looking for ways to survive, and so women and children often end up in the sex trade, looking to simply survive. And this is, a high risk in many ways, not only to violence, but also to contracting, viruses like HIV, in places where scarcity has led to episodes of violence, and where people are really scrambling to survive. And this is a gendered effect that women and children in the sex trade are that much more vulnerable. We know that people who find themselves in the sex trade are vulnerable anyway because of attitudes around this kind of work. But this is sort of exacerbated in areas where environmental degradation has really put communities in a very tough position in terms of just having food to eat and being able to have crops that will grow and have, that are experiencing drought, for example, these kinds of things, right? It ups the ante on the scarcity model, it ups the ante on desperation. And so again, we see some effects where they are very much gendered and often negatively impact women or those who are female first. It's not that the impact isn't felt by everybody across the board. We're all in trouble if the earth is going down, right? That I don't mean to suggest otherwise, but just that in a lot of locations we can see that those people who have the most immediate, are impacted in the most immediate way, right off the bat, kind of, who feel those effects first, are women. And because women do the caretaking work when something is wrong in their environment, because they provide for their families in terms of the reproduction of daily work and food provision and the caretaking work involved in families and communities. Some of that, it does involve the provision of water and the cooking of food and the tending of fields when there's technology available. Men are able to go away to do those kinds of jobs. Women see those things first. Their lives tend to be really, in lots of locations, very intimately linked to the natural world. And so when there are changes, women see them and women feel them. And because they're working with chemicals, for example, in fields, also their own bodies are often like the very first line of attack when environmental change, the effects are really harmful and involve like poisons and toxins and those kinds of things. It's a woman's body that is on the front line. It's there first. And so again, she's more likely to, in lots of communities and lots of locations across the globe, sort of see this stuff first and experience it first. So you have written your first quiz. Everyone did all right, I think, for the most part. I marked them. I had a look at them. So now you at least, it's only worth 5. They're only worth 5%, right? There's 3 each. So now you have sort of an idea about what they're going to look like. What else? You're working on your journals, and also this was the first week for the discussion forum. There's another one in Unit 8 and another one in Unit 10. So I hope that you're sort of enjoying that. I hope you had fun looking at your ecological footprint and maybe were horrified. I'm not sure. But what I do sort of imagine happened is that I'm hoping you're sort of thinking about ways where you can reduce your footprint, right? Small things that we're all able to do every single day, and choices that we can make about how we're going to use our resources or kinds of resources that we use, and choices we can make to sort of reduce that. So I hope that was kind of eye-opening for you and interesting and has given you some food for thought about how you operate in the world around you. I'm here as always if you need to talk about any of the material or any of that stuff, have questions about assignments, any of those things. Yes, so stay warm, bundle up, take care, and I will see you in about a week.